Hello and welcome to On the Corner, the official podcast, pitcherlist.com. I'm your host, Eric Samulski, joined on this Monday afternoon by Nick Pollack. Nick, happy Monday to you, sir.
Happy Monday, Eric. How are you doing?
I am all right. We, battled through the norovirus at home. Now we're into the sore throat, stuffy nose phase. It's just, I try and defend January because my birthday is in January. But it's a tough month to defend.
No,
I'm not gonna lie. It's freezing cold always. It's pretty gloomy.
Yeah,
there's a lot of days. I get it.
Yeah, January is my least favorite month of the year.
I know. I have friends that say the same thing, and I always fight back. And there's just, I got to the point where I'm using the Australian Open as a reason to defend January, and it's I'm grasping at straws here. I like tennis. I like the Australian Open.
The Australian Open, man,
that's basically all I got. That's all I got. That's what I got.
Oh my gosh, no!
I got that at my birthday, and obviously the NFL playoffs, and that's basically it.
Yeah, and
Roki Sasaki signing somewhere, which will eventually happen in January.
Yes. No, it's my least favorite month of the year because it's always stressful for me. If you guys don't know, which I don't know how you don't, but we always have our new launch in February of every year. And we are doing massive prep work for that, including me crafting my ridiculous top 400 starting pitchers or whatever. And there's never enough time. So it's just an endless month of stress and making sure that we get everything in order and that we aren't making the worst business decisions in the world, which we're not. But having everyone listen to these podcasts still now is fantastic. Signing up for PL Pro, we've gotten a lot of recent subscriptions, reading the rotation breakdowns that we've been doing as well. I'm really excited to share with everybody what we're going to be doing this year as well. So there's a lot of stuff on the horizon, and we're really excited about it. And of course, there's PitchCon coming. We haven't put out the official image letting everybody know, but it's gonna be 4 days from Thursday the 30th of January through Sunday February 2nd. We're hoping to raise $10,000 for ALS. If you're unfamiliar with PitchCon, it is a conference we do. It's gonna be 44 hours of live streaming, 100% free. Just come to our website, go to playback.tv/pitcherlist as well, and the whole goal is to get donations for ALS. It's a fundraiser with baseball analysts from all around the industry, from MLB Network, from your favorite fantasy site, everywhere. We just do panels and presentations and encourage you guys to donate to a great cause. So we raised $15,000 last year, and 100% of everything we raise goes to it. Pitcherlist does not take a dime of your donations. So we're really, really thrilled about it. And that will be on January 30th, starting at, I believe it's 11 a.m. Eastern time.
It's always super fun. I haven't told you I'm going to be involved this year, but I assume you think I'm going to be involved. So I'd like to be involved.
I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like you to be involved. You should.
That's great. I'm
looking forward to it. You should fill it out.
I think I might have. I don't know.
You better.
I'll have to look. I probably did. If I got it, I filled it out. Who knows?
Okay. All right.
I'll figure it out.
But what are we doing today, Eric?
Yeah. So I have started going through what articles did I write last year? What do I want my content plan to be for the preseason this year? And I've started outlining kind of my ideas, and I do this article every year where I create a leaderboard, a custom leaderboard of stats that I like. And I just populate all the pitchers who threw more than 50 innings last year. And I go through the league average, and I basically delete anybody that was below league average in each of the individual stats. And then you theoretically get a leaderboard of guys who were at least above average in everything that I look for in starting pitchers.
Right.
And it just had me sort of thinking about, what do I look for when I'm evaluating starting pitchers? We talk about stuff on the podcast all the time. Obviously, somebody reached out to me on Twitter about how sometimes we mention wins, but we shouldn't be mentioning wins because we shouldn't put stock in wins. And it's what is the global way in which we evaluate pitchers? Obviously, the 5x5 categories are important because it's what we're scored in, but we're also trying to kind of predict who might do well in those categories.
Right.
And so I thought we'd play a game that we call This or That. And we each are giving each other pairs of pitchers who are going at similar ADPs. And we are going to, on the spot, without having known who these pairs are, talk through our evaluations of those guys and how we might decide prioritize one player in the draft over another. And so the goal of this is, because we haven't prepped for this ahead of time, like if I give you a pair of starters, you're going to go to those player profiles and you're going to start looking at, okay, what is the first thing we're going to see? What's the first thing Nick Pollack looks at when he's trying to see how successful a pitcher is? What does he actually evaluate? How does he use these stats to stack up these two pitchers together, with the goal being not just to kind of give you an answer, but to provide a template of what we do, so you can determine which of that makes sense to you and which of it doesn't. And then when you need to make these decisions for your drafts or in season, you could have kind of used what we did and maybe tweaked it for yourself and decide, okay, how am I going to evaluate these pitchers and make this decision for myself?
And there you go. I mean, I know my answers already about how I do the evaluation. I'm curious to hear yours as well. I think it's going to be a fun podcast. I love that I have no idea who the guys are that you're going to suggest to me, and I'm going to have to react on the spot. So can't wait.
Some of them I've intentionally chosen for you. Others I just think will be interesting discussions. And the first interesting discussion, Nick and I decided we were going to avoid pitchers like inside the top 10, kind of top 10, maybe top 15, guys who we've discussed ad nauseum and like, are good, and you're probably going to draft like whoever's there, and you're just like nitpicking between them. So my first two guys are just going outside. Or actually, one guy is the 30th starter off the board currently, and the other is the 31st. So they're back-to-back. Reminder, again, I just have to throw this caveat. These are ADP rankings for drafts going on right now, which tend to be for draft and hold formats, so they're a little bit different than redraft. We've said this the last 3 podcasts, but still, just have to throw it out there. So the number 30th starting pitcher off the board, Grayson Rodriguez, going an ADP of 110, and then right after him, Hunter Brown, going an ADP of 111, back to back. How are you evaluating them? And just Uncle Ted with a good question here. Nick and I pretty much always rank for 12-team leagues, so we're going to be talking about these pitchers as if we were in 12-team leagues. That tends to be how we operate when we look at starting pitching. Okay,
so one of the flaws of setting up a podcast like this.
Did you pick the exact 2 for me?
Yes. Exactly those 2, because I think that's a very fun question of you have a season from Hunter Brown that was a very solid one after that Royals start and lots of highs there. And then you have a lot of, well, what is it with Grayson Rodriguez? Is he actually going to be good? Is he not? It was a 124 whip and a 3.86 ERA. Is he going to throw 117 innings again? Is it going to be more than that? I'll put it quick as far as what I look for. It's all about the narrative of their arsenal and understanding, okay, they had these results. What we're seeing is the output was this 3.86 ERA and the 124 whip. But you'll also see the output of those results at the pitch level too. And those will translate essentially to the ERA whip in some way, whether it's they had a high ICR, that is the contact they allowed was high, so thus they had a higher hit per 9, thus the whip was higher, or they didn't get strikes on this pitch, thus he's going to have higher walk rates to get that whip or their ERA in that way, or their home run rates will be bad on this one, or they won't have any pitch that has a swing strike rate. That means that he's not going to have a strikeout rate that's high, or he has a bad put away rate on his slider. That's why he didn't get strikeouts on that pitch, right? Every single pitch type that everyone has inside their arsenal contributes to that final number. And that's my whole essence, is just instead of looking at the result of it, look at the individual pitches and see, okay, did this actually give the result we expected? And also, is there a tweak that's a simple one that can make this better, right? Oh my gosh, it's such a good pitch. Wow, that one was so terrible. Why was he throwing that one 25% of the time? He likely won't next year. Whoa, he should be better then, right? So when I look at Grayson Rodriguez, for me, it's the fastball has all the things that we like when it comes to its pitch shape. It has relatively flat attack angle, decent, not amazing. Like it's 15 inches of vert, but it's 7.3 inches of extension. 7.3 feet of extension. That's 97th percentile and at 96. And I see that and I think, oh, okay. I don't really kind of care about the vert in the attack angle if you have that kind of extension and velocity. That means that you need to have an arsenal to support it. That is, this is a fastball that should just cook all the time as long as they're not just sitting on it. And he's not really there yet with his secondaries. He does get strikes with the changeup and the slider and the curveball, but the locations of them are not ideal. He only has a 11%. I apologize. The CSW is a little bit lower on the change, like 30% or so. The ICR and the slider, for example, is 44%. That's kind of telling me, well, you're allowing way too much contact on this over the plate. And he's throwing so many of these over the middle. And I think of Grayson Rodriguez, and I think, oh, your fastball's amazing. You have a filthy changeup and slider. And generally, it means over time you get better at these things. Then I look at Hunter Brown, and I see someone who had a vast array of pitches, changed from his slider to his cutter during the season last year. And nothing is truly elite with what he does. I wouldn't say that Hunter Brown is someone who's just completely locked in with what he does start to start. And because of that, I'm more out on Hunter Brown. I think there's nothing that says I demand success in what I do. And with Grayson Rodriguez, it's so vastly clear with that amazing fastball. The stuff is great. It's just you got to get more time to figure it out and get the confidence and the approach that works, and then just go and have yourself a field day. Well, Hunter Brown, yeah, it should be fine, but I mean, it still was a 127 whip at the end of the day last year. And I think that's a product of kind of hitability for what he does. He doesn't really have that signature, oh my gosh, I'm going to get you out with this pitch, unfortunately. So at the end of the day, I'm going to go for Grayson Rodriguez, especially in 12-teamers. That's just way too big of a potential top 10, top 15 pitcher over Hunter Brown.
I love that. Yes, that would be, I mean, I'm not going to break down my stat stuff on that just because we're going to go into that, but that would be my call as well. I would lean on Grayson Rodriguez, I think, without getting into the nitty gritty of it. I worry Hunter Brown hasn't decided who he is as a pitcher.
Yeah, right.
Exactly. And so even though he had a great second half of the year, it wouldn't surprise me if we saw him continue to tinker. And I just like the arsenal that Grayson Rodriguez has. I think the ballpark is obviously good. And so, yeah, I am a fan of Grayson Rodriguez. I had him right around Bobby Miller last year, and they both didn't pan out for different reasons.
I think I did too. I dropped down Grayson slightly, but I was higher probably than you on Bobby Miller. So
yeah, but listen, I mean, it's really good swinging strike rate numbers. The barrel rate was below, whatever. We'll go into all that later.
Yeah,
but I am a fan of that. I like that call. And I think Grayson Rodriguez, where he's going right now, we'll see what happens in redraft formats. But like the 30th starting pitcher off the board feels like some good value for a guy who it wouldn't shock me if he's a top 15 pitcher by the end of the year. We know he has that. We know he has that raw ability.
Yeah, going around 110 also in drafts. I mean, that means my strategy for 12-teamers, I'm going to say this a lot, and I'm sure so many of you listening have listened throughout the year, especially if you're listening in January right now. You know this, but I'm very much of the game plan of hitter friendly for the first 6, even 7 rounds, but then going so hard into starting pitcher 3 to 4 straight rounds right after, which means that I generally have around pick 110 or so, which is I'm thinking about 12-teamers is like end of round 9, 110. I normally have my 3rd starter by then, and that's where Grayson Rodriguez is going in this draft and hold setup, which might translate to 12-teamer as well. I would very much be in on that, but he's my 3rd one and not the anchor number 1, who you're not going to drop Grayson Rodriguez through the year. Right. And that's the whole mentality to me. You have to draft 4 guys that you're not going to drop. There are going to be a lot of guys that you think are so exciting and amazing, and oh my gosh, you can see how they could be so good. And then it's the middle of June. You're like, oh my gosh, this guy's terrible. How could I do this? And you really have to just avoid any of those. That guy still might be great. You don't have to win your league getting that guy because he worked out, is my point. There are a lot of great pitchers that will help you out in a year. But Grayson Rodriguez, he will certainly not be dropped on your team. So I'm very big on him at pick 110.
At the cost. So who is my second pairing? And then you can obviously, as I'm talking, determine who you want to replace.
It's obviously going to be a guy who had a terrible, disappointing 2023. Okay. And we were wondering really if we were going to like him in 2024. And it seems that everybody is really in for him in the next season, as he's going at 128 overall right now, and that is Carlos Rodon. And there's a guy that I don't know if this is where he's going to land later on. He was obviously hurt last year a bit, wasn't able to really get into his groove, but it's Justin Steele. It was at
you didn't pronounce. I don't think you pronounced it right.
I didn't. Justin Steele. Thank you so much, Eric. Yes, appreciate that. So, who would you rather have, Carlos Rodon or Justin Steele, Eric?
Sure. So that's a really good. That's a good choice. So I will walk you through kind of how I go about doing this.
Please.
So for me, I'm also pulling both of these guys up on the pitcher up their pitcher listed pages. So that's why I'm kind of like rambling as I talk. But I'm a sucker for strikeouts, and I understand it's a crutch sometimes. But what is like one of the first things I look at is strikeouts. So the first thing I will take into account is the arsenal. You are able to kind of like rattle off what somebody does without even having to look at it. I will often check, but I do like to make sure I want at least, we've talked about this before, I want at least one pitch for strikes and one pitch for swinging strikes. Like one pitch that they land in the zone, one pitch that they get swings and misses with. I in my head refer to that a little bit as like a Spencer Strider adjustment, because I had previously wanted to see at least a 3-pitch arsenal, good fastball, at least one swing and miss secondary, and an additional secondary, because I just, generally speaking, that helps starting pitchers. Obviously, Spencer Strider proved you don't necessarily need that if you can have a breaking ball that you can throw for strikes and get swings and misses on.
Right.
So right off the bat, Justin Steele, we know, has a four-seamer that he commands in the zone really well. It still gets above average swinging strike rates in addition to getting above average strike rates overall. So the command of that pitch is pretty good. We don't necessarily love the below average velocity, below average extension, below average IVB. The vertical approach angle, or the height adjusted vertical approach angle, is basically it's 0.3. All the stuff we can see on pitcher list, but it doesn't get hit hard. He commands it well. Winds up getting a decent amount of ground balls with it, and has in the past. So I like that he can get ahead with that. And then the slider is a pitch that has, generally speaking, has above average swing strike rates. It saw a step back last year in terms of the swing and miss ability, but he also commands it in the zone really well. And he's a guy that we've talked about in the past, of like how he is able to tweak the slider a little bit. It's not just like I throw one slider and this is the slider I throw.
Right. Yeah.
He can modify the shape. He can modify the velocity. He throws it, yes, it is usually low and in to righties, but it doesn't have to be. He will backdoor a slider, things like that I enjoy from the rest of his arsenal. The sinker, he started to use the sinker a little bit more last year. He didn't use it a lot in 2023, but I don't mind it to neutralize lefties a little bit as a fastball to lefties.
Oh yeah, 25% usage against 26% against lefties, nearly exclusive actually.
Yeah,
and then there's 26% IC. I love it.
There's not much else. I mean, there's not a lot of changeup usage. There's not a lot of curveball usage. So we're looking at that kind of like 3-pitch mix. Long track record, or not long, 3-year track record of like low 3s ERAs. I like to look at strikeout minus walk rate is something that I'm a fan of in general, because I think that it is an all-encompassing stat that really kind of takes into account walk rate as well. But a 6.7% walk rate for Justin Steele, a 24.3% strikeout rate. So it's like slightly above average strikeout rates and above average walk rates. So he is not like an elite swing and miss pitcher, but he is a above average swing and miss pitcher who doesn't give up hard contact, who fills up the zone really well, who will have a good team behind him. And so generally speaking, I think that is a pretty stable option for me. I feel like I know what I'm going to get from Justin Steele, and it's not going to be great in terms of like, I don't think there's more strikeout upside coming. His last 3 strikeout rates are 24.6%, 24.6%, 24.3%. Like we know who he is, right? Carlos Rodon, more volatile, but the strikeout rate upside is significantly higher. We saw it in 2021. We saw it in 2022. And so that was something that I think he has that over Justin Steele. Gives up far more hard contact. The four-seam fastball was not nearly as impactful for him as it was in years past. Has a much lower zone rate than Justin Steele's does. Gets hit harder than Justin Steele's does. So even though it is a higher velocity pitch, I think it's not as good as Justin Steele's fastball in terms of I know that he can locate it in the zone, and I know it's not going to get crushed. The slider is a really good pitch. Almost 19% swinging strike rate. The ICR on it last year was just 36.5%, which is pretty good. I mean, it's not like a great number, but it is a good number for a pitch that also misses tons of bats. We know it grades out really well on PLV, doesn't get hit relatively hard. And then the interesting thing for me with Rodon, as I pointed out, my Arizona Fall League presentation was the changeup. The changeup from July 1st on, he started using the changeup about 20% of the time to righties. He had a 3.34 ERA, a 1.18 WHIP, and a 31% strikeout rate in 15 starts. From that point on, the changeup was kind of a real game changer for him. It doesn't grade out well on PLV because, as you guys know, if you use PLV takes into account command, and the changeup had just a 28% zone rate. So he doesn't command it really well. He does rely on swings and misses. And when he gets them, great, but it makes that pitch a little volatile because hitters can start spitting on it if they see it low in the zone, things like that. But I like what it means is we have off-speed pitches for swings and misses. We have off-speed pitches or fastballs for strikes, kind of. We have a deeper pitch mix, in my opinion, for Rodon if that changeup is in there, because there's three true pitches. And at the end of the day, as I'm talking myself into this right now, I think better team context slightly for the Yankees. I think they'll score a few more runs than the Cubs. Neither ballpark is great, but the Yankees ballpark is not particularly good. But if I'm talking about what I was mentioning at the beginning, Rodon doesn't really command the slider all that well, doesn't really command the changeup all that well in terms of throwing them for strikes. The zone rate on the fastball is below average as well, and the fastball itself was kind of below average. So even though the strikeout upside is higher for Rodon, in my opinion, I think he's a much riskier option because he doesn't have that pitch that we know that he can command for strikes when he needs to. I worry a little bit about the regression we've seen so far as the fastball has been getting hit harder. I tend to avoid guys who give up a lot of hard contact. And so I think despite acknowledging Rodon has higher upside, I would be taking Justin Steele over Carlos Rodon.
I mean, I agree with you. Justin Steele's the guy. Oh man, drink some water. And
I'm talking.
No, yeah, I mean, Justin Steele actually to me has 5 pitches because it's 2 different breakers really in that slider and 2 different fastballs. That four-seamer is sometimes straighter, sometimes it's cut. And then he has that sinker again, 26% of the time thrown to lefties. I don't have all these numbers always at the top of my head because I haven't gone through all my rotational breakdowns just yet. I haven't done my flashcards for everyone yet. But fortunately I did remember Grayson and Hunter. But yeah, with Justin Steele, really, I'm really impressed that he just constantly gets low ICR marks on everything. Yeah. He prevents home runs. He is actually a legitimate home run suppressor. And that's why you see those ERAs that are always so low. It's under 0.8 every year, homer per 9. I actually think that when you're at 130 in your draft for a 12-teamer, which again, it might not be because these are different formats and everything like that, it changes the value of when you got to go for stuff. But if this is essentially deciding your 4th starting pitcher, I'm always taking Justin Steele because that is bankable, solid production that you can now go get that strikeout upside as a chance for someone else in 5th or 6th. It's easier to find that actually than it is the good safety, not like a potential 120, 125 whip safety of a 3.8 ERA we're talking like great ratios with a good win chance every time. And it's not like he won't get strikeouts 170 or so because he's a K/9 guy. So I'm a huge fan of Justin Steele actually this year. When people were talking about, oh, we got to get Framber Valdez or so, why get Framber when you can just get Justin Steele later on? It's how I feel about this.
I will just wrap it up by saying I don't think Rodon is a 3.96 ERA 1.22 whip guy with
that changeup.
He can be.
He does have the changeup, but the changeup comes along. Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. I think we should see a better overall season from him than we saw in 2024. So you still might be able to get Rodon at a value in your drafts. Again, the choice though between those two, I choose.
And it's not like he's totally free from health stuff, and also he's, as you mentioned, with the fastball declining, is it going to get worse? It is interesting how much he also really leaned on the slider only against lefties. Last year it was just 2-pitch against lefties, and then he tried to do more against righties, and that's why the changeup showed up more for Rodon by the end. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I'm going to go with Steele just like you. Who do you got for me here?
Well, I'll tell you, but I'll tell you after this break.
Nice. All right.
Keep
it going.
We are back. We're jumping down here, Nick. We're going to guys going around the 60th overall starting pitcher. So we're jumping down significantly. But I got to talk to you about a particular pitcher that I know had a great year last year that you're not super high on. So the first guy up is going to be the 61st starting pitcher off the board, going pick 217 overall, Spencer Arrighetti.
Yes.
Or the 62nd pitcher off the board, going pick 218 overall,
Don't do this.
Tanner Houck.
Oh, okay, good. I thought you were going to do Bowden Francis because I've talked so much about.
No, we've talked too much about Bowden Francis.
Huge shout out to Frank Stanfield, by the way. He sent me a text like, "Hey, how do you feel about Bowden Francis?" And I could be very wrong on Bowden. Maybe I'm just underrating the fastball. I just remember watching a specific game against your Red Sox, Eric. And Bowden Francis's fastballs were just so not great, and they churned out. And I just thought, why? How? Okay. Spencer Arrighetti versus Tanner Houck is a very interesting one because Tanner Houck had his success last year. Houck with a splitter becoming a major thing against lefties. We entered the season around this time actually talking about Garrett Whitlock versus Tanner Houck and saying, look, we think that Tanner Houck, his biggest weakness is lefties, and if he figures that out, he's clearly better than Whitlock. And there he goes with a splitter, and actually one of the very few of the year of the splitter that actually adapted a splitter and it worked. As many people reminded me on Twitter, thank you, Twitter. I remember it was Taj Bradley did this, and also Bryce Miller, and that's really it. It was like Hunter Green too. Anyway, Houck introduced it. It was so good in that first half. And while the results were fine-ish by the end, it was not the same Tanner Houck. His precision was lost with that splitter. The slider wasn't overwhelmingly crushing guys. It just does not feel like a guy who I'm ever going to feel totally confident with. Even when he was going through it last year, I remember not putting him inside like my top 10 or 15 or so. Like people were shouting. It was because I don't really think this is a skill set that sticks for the entire year. It's one of those, I'm in a good rhythm and this won't last. Right. So I'm generally avoiding Houck, and I feel as if with Spencer Arrighetti, you can at least see if he's taken a step forward or not since last year. There were elements of his game that woke up in that his fastball it should be fine. It should be good enough, but it's just about the secondaries getting over the plate. And he has some filthy ones with high swing strike rates. So you throw in the Astros good team context. He's going to go every 5 days. He's going to get his volume. I feel like that is just a much better environment for him. Also with a higher breadth of pitches. It's just, all right, can you just find your groove? And then that's great. And if you are really wild in the beginning, or you're not really locking in, then I say, you know what? You're a hipster, headache inducing pitcher, stifling the entire roster. And I'm not going to deal with you. And I feel between the two of them, honestly, I believe Arrighetti's ceiling more than I do Houck's. Interesting. Also a better park as well. You don't want to deal with Fenway if I don't have to. Everyone just is bad in Fenway. So there's that included. I'm going to go Arrighetti. I'm probably not going to draft either one though. is the thing, but I'm going to go the Pasta Pirate.
Okay. Fair. I get that. Yes, I'm surprised how low Houck is going, given the year that he had last year, even with him tiring at the end of the season and his, the effectiveness of the arsenal diminishing as the season went on. Very clearly, like he was over 70. He threw over 70 innings more than he had in his career in terms of, the high of his career. So I think that obviously the fatigue makes some sense, but we know he was healthier in 2024. We know that he fixed his mechanics a little bit, so he was more directly to the plate. We know that, there were some tweaks in the arsenal that we talked about in terms of the splitter usage and things like that. I don't know that we're getting a 3.12 ERA again, but I'm surprised given what he showcased and given, the strong, I think, fine team context around him. I'm surprised that he's going after, your guys like Taj Bradley, Yusei Kikuchi.
Well, here's the thing, though. There's so many. I think it's really just showcasing how many good pitchers there are, and you got to choose your, which one you guys want. I mean, Luis Seal's going at 200, right? And I can get that one because that is a four-seamer slider changeup on the Yankees with just one Rookie of the Year, and it looks like he's on that trajectory, right? With Tanner Houck, I think it's a very understandable thought that this was a pitcher who had a good half, and that's it. And that's not really the case in full, but he also only had a 20.7% strikeout rate for the year, so 21%.
Right. And he has not been a strikeout pitcher, despite the fact that you look at his slider and you're like, man, that should miss a lot of bats. And even the 3 years past, he has not had a really high strikeout rate. And that was even including like 2022, where he had a 3.15 ERA and he was like a multi-inning guy out of the bullpen for them. You obviously usually see relievers with higher strikeout rates. So him being exclusively in the bullpen, well, almost exclusively, he did make 4 starts, but almost exclusively in the bullpen and having a 22.7% strikeout rate. I don't think Houck is ever a huge strikeout rate guy, but I think when you look at his arsenal and the way his pitches move and you continue to, I believe that Andrew Bailey is a good pitching coach who will continue to refine the rotation. Could Houck become a 24% strikeout rate guy? I think his arsenal speaks to that as a possibility, but I don't think he's all of a sudden somebody who's going to spike over 25%, and that will always keep his fantasy value a little low.
Yeah, it is really shocking to see against right-handers just a 13% swing strike rate on the slider for Houck. That is so low for a guy that we talk about having like the best slider. Not to mention, I mean, there's a sweeper at 12% usage, which might be the same thing at 18% swing strike rate. Still, it's really shocking to see that. And I have to mention, really, just for Houck, that it was a 64% strike rate splitter, which is so good for a splitter against lefties. You love to see a 33% ICR, but sinker and slider were well above 40% ICR. And that's really showcasing the importance of that splitter against lefties. And when that banded him for a bit, there you go. That's, where the downfall comes. And right, if that slider isn't that 18% swing strike rate pitch, and yes, it did come through as a put away offer, like 22%, 23%, which is fine. You want above 20% for put away rate, guys. If he's like 25%, like, oh man, this is amazing. That is good to see that, like, in that moment he's able to put guys away, but it's not this overwhelming one that you want it to be.
Let me ask you a quick question. I don't want to get too in the weeds because we have other other pairings to do. We don't want this to go on too long, but as a pitcher, the mental aspect of no longer having to be the guy. Is that a legitimate thing? I mean, there were so many times during the season where the Red Sox needed that outing from Tanner Houck. They needed 6 innings, 1 run. They needed to stop the bleeding. They were getting nothing from their other rotation pieces. They were hurt, and they were relying on him as like the only guy. And now, obviously, with Crochet and Walker Buehler, Houck is not the guy. He's just one of the guys in there.
And Lucas Giolito.
And Giolito, right. It feels like it takes some of the pressure off of him a little bit. do you think, like, from a mental component, do you think that is a benefit to pitchers, or is that would be reading too far into it?
So I don't know, because it can go both ways. I wanted it. I wanted to be that guy. I thrived in that, right? When I felt like I could be the leader in that case, I wanted to step up, right? That it depends on the guy, really. And maybe for Houck it is, hey, I want to be on the back end of it as opposed to at the front of it. I mean, you obviously have a better perception of what pressure he might have been under watching all those games. I never personally got the sense that Houck was forced to be him, because I mean, Cutter Crawford was having his moments too in the beginning of it. There was Bayo who thought that he was going to be that guy too, Pivetta. Yeah, Houck was the one initially maybe to get to him, but it's possible.
I think it felt like he was more of the guy in the second half where they needed him to be. But I also get the impression, not knowing him at all, but just demeanor on the mound, it doesn't strike me that it's a thing that would have really bothered Tanner.
No, Houck is I think Houck.
But I'm just curious, as the rotation changes, just to quickly answer Lyndon's comment in the chat. He asked about our thoughts on Cutter Crawford just while we were talking about the Red Sox. Nick and I have talked about this previously. Cutter Crawford is a guy who also we both don't feel like has like a pitch he really can rely on. Like, I need to dig down deep and get this out. So I'm going to this pitch. Again, that could change in 2025. Last year was his first full year as a starter. We don't know what he's been doing in the offseason. One pitch could take a step forward. So you got to be open to pitchers with limited experience making those jumps. But as of right now, Crawford seems like a volatile pitcher who will have some really good stretches and some stretches where he runs into those home run issues that he had over the summer because he gives up a lot of contact. He doesn't have a true pitch that he can trust. We just mentioned the Red Sox have 6 starting pitchers now, including Crawford. So do they go to a 6-man rotation? Does Crawford become kind of like a piggyback guy because he's been in the bullpen before? Do they slow roll Lucas Giolito because they don't want him throwing tons of innings? So that is something to keep in mind, but it's not a lock that Crawford and Giolito right now feel like 5 and 6, given their respective bullpen / injury questions around them, because you know that Crochet, Buehler, and Houck are locked into the top 3. They gave Bayo a huge extension before last year. They still believe he is the future in their rotation. He's going to be 4. So then Giolito and Crawford are the next 2 guys. So it's just what are they going to do? We don't know yet for sure.
Well, hold on. I'm going to push back. That Giolito is 100% in this rotation. There is no world I see.
Yes, but remember that they get an additional year option if he throws under 140 innings.
The quote I just saw was him being like, I don't know why anyone is saying any of this stuff. Like, I'm ready and I'm good to go and I'm in the rotation at the start of the year.
How many times have you heard a pitcher say, I'm ready, I'm good to go, and a team says, that's true, but we also want to keep you under 140 innings. So that's not to say, but that's not to say he's not good to go. It's just to say maybe that is a reason they go 6.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe that's a reason of saying, oh, we've got 6 guys. We don't want him to throw 160 innings. So we're going to play.
I guess I'm optimistic. I think I'm also maybe a little biased toward the Red Sox being a team that is going to try as hard as they can to make the playoffs with every single game.
For sure.
And
there's also rumors they want to trade for another starting pitcher. So we have no idea what's going to happen.
And the way I see it is just like whatever that year is, it doesn't matter if Giolito is killing it. Like they'd rather have him having success this year. That's the way I see it there. And Crawford's clearly like, he's out of that rotation.
I think Crawford is out unless they go 6-man. Is my
that's what I would say as well. I probably would say that's Crochet 1, Giolito 2, and then you can even make a case that it's like Houck 3 or something.
Is there not a team that is more perfectly set up to use a 6-man rotation? I mean, you have Walker Buehler, previous injury concerns. You have Tanner Houck, was a reliever primarily until last year. Lucas Giolito coming off Tommy John surgery. Cutter Crawford was a reliever primarily until last year. Garrett Crochet last year was his first full season as a starting pitcher. Like, doesn't it make sense for those guys to just all be in there?
It absolutely does.
Go 6?
It just means that the only problem is that you have Garrett Crochet who is ready to go for every 5 days, and you want him to go every 5 days. What I would even say is you have Crochet go every 5 days and everybody else do a like a 6.5
skip a start. Yeah.
Oh man, that's something I've been talking about for ages and it hasn't happened yet. And I want it to happen. You can do a 6-man rotation while still actually having your ace go every 5 days. You just have them go every 5 days and you keep pushing the start along. It's not that hard. And they absolutely should do that. But I would say the Dodgers is always the correct answer for it. Is there a team that's always better suited for a 6-man rotation? It's always the Dodgers, Eric.
That's true.
Every single time is a correct answer.
That's true. All right, give me your next pairing for me.
All right. These are two guys that I think just kind of get just not talked about. They're both good. I think one of them is better than the other, but then again, I think some might be leaning towards the other. I don't know where everyone stands on these guys. I'm curious where you are. They're neck and neck in ADP, right around 112 or so, 115. And that is Sonny Gray and Zack Gallen. This was on your list too, wasn't it?
No, it was not. It was not on my list. So this is interesting. I'll say, like, okay, so heading into last year, I, like a lot of people, had Gallen like inside of my top 15 for, perceived safety. And I had Sonny Gray probably like in the early 30s or something like that. I'll start with Gallen because I think he's the bigger name here. He was the higher ranked pitcher coming into last year. My concern for Gallen last year was that he gave up a lot of hard contact. He had almost a 44% ICR in 2023. It was 42% in 2024. He gives up a decent amount of hard contact. We have talked kind of exclusively about Gallen, not exclusively, we talked extensively, about Gallen needing to kind of live low in the strike zone. And he throws a lot of low fastballs because everything he throws drops out from the bottom of the strike zone. Fastball, just a 47% zone rate on the fastball last year and a 61% strike rate. Those are not good metrics for a four-seam fastball. 5.2% swinging strike rate, 47% ICR. Like, all of that is like, hey, this is a bad fastball. Now, he threw 148 innings. We know he was battling injuries. So how much of that played into those metrics, who knows? But his fastball was hit hard in years past. He commanded it better, but it was hit hard. So I think his fastball gets hit hard. Like, that's just who Zack Gallen is. Yep. He has a 5-pitch mix. He can mix and match those things. Most of the pitches grade out fairly well on PLV. The curve, the changeup, the slider kind of carry the load for him a little bit. The curve was a really good pitch for him last year. Didn't give up hard contact, got lots of swings and misses on it. Changeup, took a step back last year, also got hit hard. The slider, again, it's so tough for me because the slider wasn't great in years past. It wasn't great last year. We know he's a bad fastball guy. Is he a plus curveball and like I hope I have other things going on any given day kind of pitcher? And there's not, like, he has, unlike the Cutter Crawford comment we had, he has a pitch he can rely on. But he doesn't have 4 pitches. He doesn't have a plus fastball. There are all things like that concern me a little bit when I'm just talking about like the overall arsenal. A guy who has never been a huge strikeout rate guy, 27% around for most of for the last few years in Arizona, which is fine. But you're still looking at like a strikeout minus walk rate around 19, which is solid, not setting the world on fire, but pretty good. Swinging strike rates that are basically around league average. So a lot of Gallen's value to me came from this perceived safety of he's going to provide fine ratios. He's going to throw 180 plus innings and he's on a good team. And so that gave him value that I think we saw kind of crapped out a little bit last year when he went to 148 innings and the ratios weren't as good because the hard contact caught up with him a little bit. So I have some concerns about Gallen. Sonny Gray, huge strikeout rate bump last year, like had basically the best season he's ever had from a strikeout perspective, other than the COVID shortened 2020 year. Also had the lowest walk rate he's ever had. So if I'm looking at strikeout minus walk rate, which I like, it's basically the best season Sonny Gray has ever put together from a strikeout minus walk rate perspective. That is interesting to me. Huge jump in swinging strike rate up to 14.5%. That's like really good because the starting pitching league average is 11.7%. Even deeper arsenal than Zack Gallen. Better command on the fastball. Gives up hard contact on the fastball, but not as much hard contact as Zack Gallen gives up. Not a high swinging strike rate on the fastball, but better than Zack Gallen has. The sweeper was great last year, missed tons of bats. We know he has a slider that he uses, a sinker he uses to righties that suppresses hard contact. We know he has a cutter that he uses a lot to lefties. So even though his four-seamer is like fine, he has additional fastballs that he can use to both righties and lefties to mitigate some of that hard contact. The curveball was also a plus swinging strike rate pitch. I think Sonny Gray is a better pitcher than Zack Gallen. I think the team context is going to be probably atrocious. Assuming they get rid of Nolan Arenado as well. They'll have Mason Winn at short, and that's good, but the infield defense will take a huge step back without Arenado at third base. I don't think that this is a team that's going to score a ton of runs. So again, if you're looking at team context, I don't think it's a great team context situation for Sonny Gray. I think Gallen is in a much better team context situation. So I get using that a little bit to skew towards Gallen, but I think I lean towards, but then it's like Sonny Gray doesn't also have a really good track record of longevity, right? Not a
Make
lot
up your mind, Eric.
I want to say Sonny Gray is a better pitcher. I think he is riskier in terms of overall innings pitched and team context. And so if I'm in a 12-team league with a waiver wire, I probably would take my chances on Sonny Gray and know that I could use the wire if he got hurt.
All right. I don't know where I stand either. So this is fun. Zack Gallen, his whole thing is fastballs getting called strikes. And that took a step back last year, and that's why the walk rate went up for Zack Gallen. And the curveball is insanely good. We're talking like a 50% O swing against both lefties and righties with it. Okay. And he gets that because you throw these four seamers for called strikes because they look like they're going low and they stay back up because he has good vert on it. And then the curveball, when you have a low curveball like this, like Zack Gallen does, it really does look like the true death ball, not Jordan Montgomery's. It actually is Gallen's, because it out of the hand, it doesn't look like it has that hump, that casted look like a normal curve. It just looks like it's going over the plate and then just is dead right in the dirt. And when Gallen is going at its best, he pairs it with a changeup too. So what generally happens with batters is that they are looking down, but they can't decide what this thing is. They don't know if this is fastball. They don't know if it's curveball. They don't know if it's a changeup, right? And what happened a lot last year is that Gallen started to mess around with fastballs upstairs again, like he did in 2023 in a bad moment, and didn't really have that same feel for the fastball. And I think that is what caused a lot of the volatility that we saw. You can also mention, of course, how many innings he threw in 2023. Maybe that affected his fatigue and his ability overall in 2024. Who knows? But that's really what he does. And seeing the bit of the cracks of that armor, right, is, well, okay, if that's not really there, if you can't set up the death ball, then it is going to be that kind of season again with a 120 plus whip for Zack Gallen. On the other side with Sonny Gray, you see this 30% strikeout rate. And anytime you see a giant jump in strikeout rates, like 24% essentially to now 30%, there are a couple things you can look at. Obviously, okay, swing strike rate went up. Great. 14.5% though. And that's still, I mean, that's good. That's 89th percentile, but 96th percentile strikeout rate. There's still a gap. And you should instantly think that's efficiency. Like when you get to two strikes, how often are you actually putting them away?
Right.
It is shocking how much of a jump Sonny Gray made in put away rate. And it explains it, but it's just massive. We're talking like throughout his career, it's about a 22 to 23% put away rate across his pitches, right? Anytime you're running two strike count, when you throw a pitch, about a quarter of the time, whatever. went up to 29%, almost 30% put away rate, 99th percentile in the majors. And so then I was looking into, all right, what is it that's doing this? It's his efficiency with his sinkers to lefties as a front door surprise pitch, which is hilarious. We also saw efficiency with sweepers to lefties and curveballs to lefties. It wasn't really his best scenario against lefties before, and now all of a sudden he has like, bam, there's 3 of them. But then against right-handers, this is something else. You have 3 pitches all above a 25% put away rate. You've got 27% on the sweeper, 27% on the cutter, and 27% on the curveball. 3 different offerings, which is absolutely, and actually, I'm sorry, that was in 2023. And in 2024, he got even better than those 3. I apologize for that. We're talking 41% on his four-seamer, 40% on his sinker. Oh my gosh. 38% on his cutter, 29% on his sweeper. Those are his 4 most thrown ones. And the curveball's finally there to find just a 25%. All of his pitches in 2 strike counts. No, that doesn't happen. You normally see like some of them are under 20%, 18% or something like that. The efficiency of Sonny Gray last year was absurd, nuts.
Yes.
And that's why that walk rate's down. It's because he's actually being efficient in ending the at-bats so that it doesn't turn into a walk.
Yeah, yes. You're not going to get what you got from him last year.
Right, but understanding is that how does that cascade? How does that change everything else? And when you realize that it's put away rate, which generally isn't sticky unless you're like Tyler Glasnow, which is hilarious. His hit per 9 has always been the same. The home runs actually went up last year. His left on base rate went down, and that's why you see the ERA being weird. I guess what I'm saying is that Sonny Gray is still this low mid 3s ERA guy with like a 115 whip ish and a 25% K rate. That's still who he is.
Which is kind of Zack Gallen, except Gallen historically has had a better whip. But Sonny Gray historically has given up significantly less hard contact. So you're looking at pitchers who are probably pretty similar in terms of who they are, ERA and strikeout rate wise. One of them gives up and has always given up less hard contact. And so that hard contact factor to me, like, I'm trying not to get Kevin Gossman this year, where I'm like, hey, this guy has an elite pitch and he is an ace, but he gives up a concerning amount of hard contact. But that hasn't been a problem in the past, and he's pitched better. And then it's like,
that's Gallen. We're talking about Zack Gallen.
We don't want pitchers to give up lots of hard contact. We know that is a tightrope, and that's hard to walk if you are consistently giving up tons of hard contact.
You're describing Zack Gallen of like a fastball that has been a called strike pitch to set up your secondary that is amazing, and that's the curveball.
Right.
The only difference between him and Gausman is that Gallen sometimes has a changeup and sometimes even like a slider / cutter too.
And the curveball is a strike in the zone more often than
I would wager that Sonny Gray is more consistently just good and beneficial and helpful for your fantasy teams than Zack Gallen. So I'm going to go with Sonny Gray here.
Woo! I'm shocked I'm actually surprised that we both came to that conclusion. That's interesting. We've got another one a little bit later in the ADP, but we'll get to that after this break. So we'll end. I'll give you one more. You are the host. You are the guy, and you're rambling less than I am. So I'll give you last one. This came up a little bit. I was always thinking I was going to give you this pitcher to talk about, but then there was a long discussion. Kind of, I think, started a little bit yesterday, and then on throughout on Twitter.
I saw that there was a conversation about a player. Okay.
Started by my buddy Torres asking why people are picking Sean Burke so high in drafts. And now I will just say right here, Sean Burke is going pick 522. So this is like for really deep leagues or for draft and hold formats. But I think it also kind of like hits a little bit. Maybe it's for 15-team leagues, but it hits a little bit at like strategy.
Yeah,
because these are 2 different types of pitchers that I'm going to give you. And the question is like where you're going here. So Sean Burke, ADP 522. Or Edward Cabrera, ADP 538.
That's so easy.
I know it's easy. but I wanted you. I know your answer is Edward Cabrera.
Yes.
But I wanted you to talk through like how you're evaluating these pitchers, because I
Sure.
think they're at those ADPs for very different reasons.
Mhm.
And so when you're looking at pitchers like this who are at a similar ADP for different reasons, why are you prone to go with one or the other?
Yeah, sure. Also, I have two for you that you can think about as I do this little ramble. It's our boy Jared Jones, or is it Jack Flaherty? You can think about that. And
I'll give a quick answer at the end then.
There you go. So Eric Cabrera versus versus Sean Burke in 12 teamers. Let's think about this. Okay. So I'm not even going to talk about Sean Burke. I'm going to talk about just Eric Cabrera right now, where he is a case of having something so interesting and actually understandable to being elite, right? He has this elite changeup that somehow didn't get enough strikes against the lefties. Actually, I just wrote about Eric Cabrera in depth on the website. If you have PL Pro, you can see my very deep thoughts about it. It's like 5 paragraphs. It's what will be in the public top 400 in February. For those of PL Pro, you can check it out. But Eric Cabrera, changeup, not doing well against lefties. Slider that I think is actually really, really good, that he doesn't throw enough, but started to throw a little bit more by the end. And I imagine he's getting depressed in his value, or at least his ADP, just because he was underneath 100 innings last year. And if I'm in a 12-teamer, I'm all about quick decisions and trying to get the best pitcher possible and knowing if it's going to work or not early. Mm-hmm. So with Eric Cabrera, a guy who's had walk rates up the wazoo, 15% walk rate, 12% walk rate, and it's so easy for any projection system to say, well, he's going to have a 12% walk rate, and like, oh, he's not going to be good because of this, and his FIP has been over 4. And like, yeah, I know. And what those things don't actually tell you is what was the input for that output. And the input is a rare set of skills that no one else has with those things. And you should be thinking, okay, wait, hold on a second. If we change one lever or something like that, is it just a small change or is it a big one to everything? And in the case of Eric Cabrera, it does speak to elite upside. When you throw as hard as you do within a 100th percentile changeup velocity at 93 last year, and also at 96 with 6.7 extension as well, it really just means, look, Edward, your 4-seamer is terrible against lefties. Just throw this thing over the plate, okay? You have a really good slider that you're not really utilizing right now. You have this elite changeup that you should be throwing more as well. And also, you should embrace that sinker and try to learn how to jam right-handers with that. That should be the focus for me right now. But 4-seamers should be saved 15% of the time. You should go changeups, and you should go sliders and curveballs. And honestly, he should not have a 12% walk rate. He's a guy that can make that leap, as we've seen in the past, from a double-digit walk rate down to like an 8% walk rate. And then all of a sudden, you remember, wait, he had a 26% K rate last year. He had a sub 40% ICR. He has a changeup that had a 33% ICR. I mean, there's all these little elements. So if I'm drafting, I'm going to say, great, let me get this guy. And obviously, spring's going to change these things. But let's just say it starts tomorrow. I'm going to say, I want to see how Edward Cabrera looks. And if he's not fixed, if he's still looking, whatever, then I say, fine, I'm done. He might be good tomorrow. It doesn't matter. He might be good tomorrow, then bad the next one. I don't feel he's made enough changes right now that I feel confident in this. With Sean Burke, I'm intrigued by him. I'm just going to throw out there right away. Yes, the Marlins and the White Sox both are not going to win games.
They're bad teams, yeah.
So I think it's interesting that White Sox pitchers actually get a badder or worse rap about it. Mm-hmm. Eric Cabrera pitched 20 starts last year and only had 4 wins. Sean Burke had 3 starts and 2 wins. Just want to say that. It's not out of the question that Sean Burke has more wins than Eric Cabrera. So I'm not even going to throw that into this equation at the moment. What I am going to say is the raw ability of Sean Burke is interesting. It is 17 to 18 inches of vert, which is great. He has 7 feet of extension in 95. Those are 3 great elements of the Fantastic Four. That is the 4 elements of making a whiff. His height adjusted VAA is 0.8. It's nothing to write home about. But he also has 2 breaking balls. He has a curveball and a slider. The slider had a 22% swing strike rate last year. And I think the curveball is a little too loopy in a way that's harder for him to command right now. It was about 60% strike rate. Very small sample size of 19 innings. But when you just look at those skill set of, hey, you have a fastball that you can establish in the zone and it can do really well with high intent, 62% high lock, which is I think 97th percentile or something like that, like something really high for going upstairs with a pitch that should be high. And then you have a slider that gets whiffs and then a curveball that can also be for strikes. That's the 3-pitch mix that I want for anybody. It's too bad he's on the White Sox, but that could work out. And also, it's only been 3 starts. So I don't know. And I'm not going to go after Sean Burke because I don't feel like I need to. I don't feel as if everybody's going to say that he's going to have this breakout season or so. I think that he honestly needs more polish. But Eric Cabrera is like so much clearer of what we're going to be looking for and what change we need to see. And that's the difference, really. Sean Burke, he could be good for 5 games and then be bad. I don't know yet. There's not enough data on him to know exactly what his foundation is to then distinguish what it changes.
If you had to, just in the spirit of the argument, not the argument, it was a polite discussion between professionals on Twitter. But in the spirit of that, if you were in a situation where you had to keep one guy on your roster the whole season, didn't matter what they were doing, does that change how you view those 2 guys?
It does a little. I have a little more faith in Sean Burke. Like slightly more, just because of the fastball, I think is just better and it's more consistent. At the same time, I think a lot of people don't recognize that if you're not first, you're last a lot. At least that's how I play. And Eric Cabrera has a more tangible ceiling to me. That would actually be a shift at that draft pick that you have to hold the whole entire season for and get, value out of. Like you're hoping to hit something. So I would probably go Eric Cabrera.
Okay. Good to know.
Yeah. All right. Jared Jones or Jack Flaherty, Eric?
Yeah, it's Jared Jones for me. And it's kind of simple. Jared Jones has like an elite fastball.
What?
It's really good. Yeah. I don't think we've ever talked about that. Yeah, Jared Jones has an elite fastball. It's a very, very good fastball. There were some inconsistencies with it and some of his other pitches during the year, but I'm not overly concerned about that. I mean, he's a 23-year-old who made a big jump up to pro ball. And, at this time last year, we weren't even thinking about him in the rotation. And so, yeah, there's going to be some inconsistencies. There's going to be some bumps and some things he needs to learn. But the foundation is a really good fastball and a really good slider, a four-seam fastball that he throws in the zone a lot, which also gets above average swinging strikes and also doesn't give up lots of hard contact. We love that about the fastball. The slider is a really good swinging strike rate pitch, but an average command pitch. But again, it's an average command pitch and a good swinging strike rate pitch. And that's important because all of Jack Flaherty's off-speed pitches were so poor in terms of their zone rate, so poor. His slider, his curveball, his changeup, they all relied so heavily on, I guess the slider, that's 2023. Yeah, all of them were so poor. They all relied on swinging strikes. And that's fine. Like, especially if you're getting them, right? If a pitcher is getting swinging strikes, they're not going to all of a sudden be like, hey, I'm not throwing this pitch in the zone. Like, why not? I should, right? They're going to keep making you chase the pitches until you stop chasing the pitches. So on some hand, like we're not leaning into that too much. It worked for Flaherty, but he was not throwing his off-speed pitches in the zone. The fastball is significantly worse than Jared Jones's fastball. The fastball is the reason I think he got he was a little bit better this year, or significantly better this year. The command of the fastball was way better. Like he had subpar command of the fastball in 2023. He had a much higher zone rate, a much higher strike rate on the pitch in 2024, a higher called strike rate. It got more swings and misses, but it's still a worse foundational fastball than Jared Jones. And then you have off-speed pitches that I still think Jones's slider is like Flaherty has more off-speed pitches, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're better. And he can't command them as well, in my opinion, as Jones with the slider. And so I think that I like Jones a little bit better as a pitcher. Plus, you have the previous health risk of Jack Flaherty, and then if we're drafting right now, you have I have no idea where he's pitching of it all. And again, I'm trying not to factor that too much into the analysis because he's going to be pitching somewhere. He's going to be starting. There's a high likelihood he's pitching for a team that will contend next year. I don't know what the ballpark is. I don't know any of that. But I think that Jack Flaherty's 3.17 ERA was significantly lower than he should have pitched at. I think that Jared Jones's 4.14 ERA is higher. I think they're both like 3.6, 3.7 ERA type of guys. I trust Jones's strikeout stuff a little bit more, even though Flaherty had the higher strikeout rate last year, and Jones gives up less hard contact and misses more bats than Flaherty.
Sure. Really quickly, Shannon Bird, McShane or Hunter Brown? McShane all day. That is Shane McClanahan. Yes. It's not even close. Just so we're all on the same page. Yes, I do expect like 140 innings. Actually, they even came out and said 150 after I was guessing 150, and that's what the number they gave is. So that's good too. It won't be in Tropicana Field, which is unfortunate. At the same time, it's still Shane McClanahan, and that's lovely. I agree with you that it is Jared Jones over Jack Flaherty. Jack Flaherty is very interesting how quickly we're able to just jump around with them, because we were not interested in Jack Flaherty last year, and then we were able to get him off the waiver wire, and he had a good-looking spring. Mm-hmm. About his zone rates, essentially with the secondaries, I'm with you that it's really hard to expect the same performance from the slider and curveball. Especially the slider was as good as I've seen him locate it ever in that first half, and that really elevated his entire performance. The fastball just is not that great, and it was in the zone early a little more than we liked, and then got a little bit worse by the end of the year as well. And it just feels like Jack Flaherty had himself a nice rhythm, and it was great. He was proving himself, contract deal, all this stuff. And it doesn't seem like it's a long track. It's not going to really stick for another full year. While Jared Jones, on the other hand, looks so good early on, still has refinement when it comes to overall command. And I think he's realizing he can't quite just do it four-seamer and slider. Sure. By the end of the year, certainly had fatigue and was just not able to locate anything. There was no confidence in what he was throwing. He was just getting demolished left and right. If you had him on your teams, it was just so difficult to throw Jared Jones out there. The game at Cincinnati and then New York, it was 8 earned runs in 2 games. It was just, it was tough. The whip was terrible, 225, 180, 162 in his last 3 games of the year, Jared Jones. And it was like, we can't do anything this. We just got to drop Jared Jones in September. But right, the four-seamer is elite. The slider, believe it or not, actually, every single pitch he threw for Jared Jones, four-seamer, slider, curveball, changeup, had higher swing strike rates against lefties. The slider was a 25% versus a 17% against right-handers, which is what? Wait, you don't see that. That's not supposed to be the case. I think it goes to show that there is this polish left for Jared Jones, because he threw a lot of those sliders down the middle.
Yeah, which is not surprising for a 23-year-old who made his MLB debut.
Exactly. And there are a lot of his heart location middle location, 80th percentile for his fastball at 9.5% as well against right-handers. And actually pretty much the same thing against left-handers too, which is pretty hilarious. So yeah, that stuff should get better in your second season as Jared Jones. And especially after just seeing Paul Skeens win the Rookie of the Year, I mean, I'm sure he's got a little chip on his shoulder. He wants to prove that he's just as good as him. So I'm absolutely going after Jared Jones. I do have some worry that Jones will still get hit harder than we want because his command isn't great.
Yeah.
It could be different second year. I think about it a lot. Of rookie year command is generally worse than second and third year. Still, it can turn into a hipster situation. At the end of the day, it was a 4.14 ERA and a 1.19 whip. Yeah. Right. That's not good for a 12-teamer.
Yes. 15. I'm trying to learn from my last year, Bobby Miller, Grayson Rodriguez. Like, yes, we believe in a bump for a young pitcher who showed plus raw stuff in their rookie year, their first year. But I don't want to rank so aggressively expecting that bump like I did with Bobby Miller and Grayson Rodriguez, where I said, okay, well, I'm going to rank for the bump, right? I'm not going to rank them passively, because then I won't get them. And then what's the point? If I believe they're going to take that leap, I should rank them assuming they're going to take that leap. And I think I'm trying to rank guys like this, assuming they maybe make 70% of the leap and not the full leap. Yeah, exactly. And then that still bakes in improvement, but it doesn't. I'm not drafting Jared Jones as if he's a 3.40 ERA pitcher with a 28% strikeout rate, which I think is within his range of outcomes if he makes adjustments. But I can't draft him assuming that happens, because you get caught holding the bag like I did with Bobby Miller a little too often.
Right. And I see Market 8, good to see you, saying that Jones was 8th percentile for hard hit and 13th for barrel. I do want to mention, when you have a swing strike rate that's 95th percentile, that means that you generally are also going to be worse on the contact side as well. So it means that you just have, instead of those being weakly hit balls, they're whiffs. So it does make it so that when you do barrel it and everything like that, there are less things against it. So it's why, like Spencer Strider, you don't want to look at those either. Or like Glasnow, don't want to look up those either. But that also means that they're getting strikeouts too. So those aren't getting included in that. I prefer per plate appearance, per pitch, as opposed to per at bat, which is a critical difference to understand how much overall hard contact they are allowing. But really, the end of the day is like, when you draft Jared Jones, there was a time last year we didn't want him on our teams. I know it sounds weird, but we didn't in September.
Or he was hurt and he wasn't on our team. But yeah.
Well, there's that too. Yeah, of course. Do we believe that there's going to be a moment in a 12-teamer this year that you don't want Jared Jones, like a hipster, right? Someone that is like your Nick Lodolo type. Is that a possibility in your head, Eric?
No.
Okay.
But that's acknowledging an improvement. And so will there be moments where I'm like, I might not want to throw Jared Jones against Atlanta because he doesn't really look good right now? Sure. But I am banking on an improvement from him, and I don't believe he's somebody you'd want to drop in a 12-teamer. He might be somebody you want to skip a start or two, depending on schedule.
Yeah. But this is fun. I like doing this or that. Man,
maybe we'll try it again as we get closer to drafts. If you are listening, we have a couple more shows before we get Nick's rankings, his top 400, and then we will go through not all of those.
We'll go through a lot of them.
We'll go through a lot
during
of
the
them
weeks
as we get closer to the season. So check that out. We'll be back again next week for another episode of On the Corner. I am Eric Samulski, the Pelican.
I'm Nick Pollack, the Lion.
And I'm going to just take a break from talking for a little bit.